Good evening, everybody. Yeah, we got it all squared away, I think. So still hearing myself. So there we go. Thought I muted that, but I didn't. What we have here is a red bud blank. My uncle brought me these several weeks ago. Actually, it's probably been a couple months ago now. What I've already done, I've already drilled a hole in it. As you can see, I didn't even bother to cut the corners off because they're small. It's only about 7 inches long and about 3 or so inches deep. Does still have some little grain checks in the end right here, so we'll have to get rid of them. I've already taken the time to try and at least get close to where the two high points are going to be. Checking to make sure we're clearing. You're going to stand off to the side. Turn it on nice slow speed. This stuff, the bark is not going to stay on, I don't think. The bark is very thin on this, but it's like real flaky. Even just cutting it on the bandsaw, it was falling off, so I don't think there'll be much chance of it staying on. At this point, we can't turn real fast, so we're going to just take our time, work on tool control. And we'll be constantly moving the tool rest for right now. And we're not going to do that with the machine running. For one, you can't see. Two, you would probably get your finger smacked. And it probably would hurt. When you get to the very bottom, didn't necessarily do a spectacular job on the bandsaw either. Very hard to actually get them cut square, and then I just stood this up on its end, which is not really the greatest way to cut them on the bandsaw, but that's what we did with it. So they're not, probably now, a little bit more in balance so we can get another 100 RPMs or so out of it. We'll just keep working it down to make it into a round blank, so to speak. And then we'll check to see whether the high points are where they belong. We'll check the low points. I like them to be balanced. We got a ways to go because I cut this actually too long. Because if I went from there, it would be very, very much a low-sided bowl. But we can check now our top. There's a tiny little flat spot there. We're pretty much smack on that. So we'll just remove some more so that we have, do something with the low point. And let's take one more. So we got low point, low point. As we can see, we took more material off there than we did there. That tells us we got to move this a little bit this way. Probably not enough. Remember, whatever I move, I'm moving in two directions. So we'll make another little cut. I'll have to go get it then. I did a Christmas tree. He brought me, this was the bigger of the, brought me 3 pieces of this. One was just like a tree branch. And I did that, I don't know, about a week or so ago. Made a little tree out of it. And this heartwood in this gets really dark. This one looks like the sapwood's got some dark in it for some reason. But the other one is like bright, sort of a bright yellow. Actually quite pretty. I even got a good compliment out of it from my wife, so. Right now we're cutting from the top down to try and keep the bark where it belongs. Sort of tapering it down a little bit. At this point it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It's going to cut cleanly either way at this point. It's when I start to, if I would start to curve it from the top down, then I'm going against, sort of going against the grain. So now we have a nice yellow, nice yellow. That's probably about good enough for that. So now we'll flatten off the bottom. And we're going to move the tailstock back a little bit. Just release it and turn the tailstock back. This is held on with a 4-prong drive center, which is the ideal way, as far as I'm concerned, to do these. The safest way. As well, gave me the most flexibility. Because otherwise, if you were to, I see people put them on a base plate, a worm screw, or whatever, then I wouldn't have the availability. Whatever I put it on at, it would have to stay there. I didn't want that because that gave me the opportunity to be able to move it and try and even some of this stuff up. So we're getting closer to being in balance. So we'll just nibble off some of this out here. Non-bevel supported cut. It's not going to give me a finished kind of a cut, but it's going to allow me to remove the unevenness very quickly and very easily, which we've done. And it looks like we need to go a little bit deeper. We're going to have to, this is going to be a very shallow bowl because this sort of has been around a little bit longer than what it should have been. It was out in the garage, but it's showing some signs of some cracking that's not very good. So we'll just make it a little shallower. There's no point in leaving the cracks in there because they'll just continue to grow. And we would not necessarily have a very good grip. I think we still got one little one left. I think till we get our shape done, I think we'll be good. I'm going to take some of this corner away because this needs to be a bowl, not a straight-sided piece. Because I want it to be nice and round. And we'll probably switch tool rests here pretty directly too. The cracks are kind of pesky there. Let's see if I can get below it. I really don't want it in the tenon either. That's just a recipe for disaster. Because a tenon on something like this, a tenon will generally, for me, is going to be part of the foot, or will be the foot. So it certainly can't have a big crack running through it. Now we got it. So we're going to need a tenon. And we're going to leave this tenon fairly good size. I wasn't so lazy, I would just change jaws in a smaller chuck, but we'll just use the bigger chuck. These jaws will be about, going to give me about a 2 or 2¼ inch tenon. So we'll just set our dividers to that. And I'm off the screen. I bring it up here, sort of on the screen. Don't drop it on your foot, would hurt. Wide now, a little bit, there we go. So if I go, this is going to be challenging. Sit. So if I bring my dividers in to where they're just a little bit bigger than the opening and straight across the jaws, that should be good. This is going to give me a nice perfect circle at about 1/8 of an inch gap in between those jaws. And we're just going to very carefully reach up over top, and we're going to center that. We're going to scribe with the left leg and match the right leg up, not allowing the right leg to touch. You'll only allow that right leg to touch one time, because you will be chasing it, chasing the dividers, and hopefully they aren't sticking in your neck or something silly, but like I say, you only do it one time. Now we can go to a shorter tool rest, so we can get in here to work a little easier, because I want to be over the meat of the tool, be over the post as much as I possibly can. So now we can work on shaping this up a little bit. We also should be quite well in balance at this point, so we can turn it at whatever speed you're comfortable with turning at. For me, it's pretty fast. It's going to allow me to make nice clean cuts. Not that the speed has anything really to do with the cleanliness of the cut, but it's going to allow me to move a little bit faster, making it a little bit more productive and get a little bit more done in a little bit less time. So our tenon is there. We'll make it fairly somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch. Like I say, it's going to become part of the foot. So I have a 3/8 inch parting tool that is grounded at an angle to match the dovetail jaws on the Vic Mark chuck. So as I go straight in, going to create me a nice dovetail on that tenon. And knock that little corner off. I don't leave any sharp corners sticking out, because sharp corners have a tendency to reach out and touch you at some point, or you're going to be dumb enough to touch them. And then we have a little bit of flat up there. So now we're going to make this curve go from this point up through the top. This is wet wood. It's going to have to dry. But we will turn it to final thickness and let it dry, and then all I got to do is come back and sand it. Yeah, you've been slacking. I haven't been. I've been doing some other stuff for one. We'll make that last cut. Hopefully that's the last cut. Yeah, so that's nice and clean. I have a little ledge in here for the chuck to register on. It's only about 1/8 of an inch wide. That's more than enough for it to register on. So as long as we have no torn grain, which we don't, I still have a tiny little crack there. It's probably still going to come back to bite me in the butt. But if it doesn't cooperate as it dries, then we'll just make this sort of a flat foot, and we can take this and make it go down a little bit further once it's dry. And we need to get that tenon down smaller diameter wise because we need to cut that off. So I just use a 3/8 spindle gouge, and I can take it down considerably smaller. Could. Did that the other day. I should be making I could make a little Morse taper going in that direction. It's probably it's probably already too small, but we'll just leave it at that, and then we'll cut it off. Easier to saw it off than you don't want the excitement of it, something flying. And a little pool saw, Japanese pool saw. Back off on some pressure, and we'll just saw it off. It'll be quick and easy. Grab the little nubbin, throw it in the trash can. Nothing finer than stepping on one of them. And let's see what we did. So yeah, it's actually too small. So it didn't move, so I can mark it. Now I have a place to register it once we get to that point. Once it's dry, and we're ready to sand and finish it. Get rid of our live center. This bed is long enough on this lathe. I don't have to take it off. It just slides back far enough to get out of the road. Use our knockout bar. Grab it by that. Don't grab it up here, or you'll have a sore hand, because they're pretty sharp. Another one of them things you want to do that once or twice too. So now we'll put it in the chuck. I'm going to line up the grain so that the grain is running up and down with my jaws. And I don't put it in there just kind of like willy-nilly. I put it in so that the grain is running up and down. Gives me the best compression. At least that's one of the professional turners from over in Ireland talked about that, and he's right. I mean, if you were to spin that around in a different fashion and clamp down on it, you'd find that it really compresses more so in some places than others. So now we can clean out the inside. Like I say, this bark is, since it started to dry, it's just falling off everywhere. And it's very, very thin for bark. But nonetheless. So let's go find the mouse. Go over to there, and you can see both directions. We could even come in a little bit on the top. And hopefully I don't stick my hand in front of the one from there. Well, I was using a swept back grind bowl gouge on that. Here's where I'll switch over to the 40-degree gouge, at least for part of this. So we changed something. We're going to slow the speed down. Bring the speed back up to what you're comfortable with. And then we'll make a cone right down the middle. I gotta have some room to move, room to work. So as I get closer to the outside edge, now I'm getting in a position myself. My right hip is up against the bed so that I can look, so that my left eye can look over here, my right eye can look down what it's doing on the inside. Take some practice to get that little brain to cooperate on that. Because I really don't need to see what the tool's doing, because I know it's cutting. And by the looks of it, we're down to about 3/8 of an inch, maybe? Somewhere thereabouts. If you wanted to be technical, 5/16. That's probably about the right thickness for a bowl that size. I can get my dividers, and we can set them so that they're a little bit 1/16 of an inch or something like that away on the outside. And as usual, and as a good thing, we start out at the top with about the 1/16. We're almost touching when we get down there in the bottom. The reason I say that's a good thing is because if you go the other way, then you'd have to come back up here and make this thinner. So at this case, at this rate, we're going to come in, we're going to lay our bevel on there, we're going to move the handle till we get a cut, and we're going to take a little bit more off, right down to that point. Now we can go back and basically rinse and repeat. This time we're going to use the left side of the wing. Get rid of some material in there. And now we have these steps that we left in, so it's a matter of, I don't pick the gouge up, I just slide right back up on the bevel. That way you never lose bevel contact. Last cut, we slow down, make it into the corner. As we approach that corner, I'm rolling the gouge over more so than almost to 90 degrees, so that if I miscalculate and run into that wall, at least it's going to scrape more than it's going to grab and try and yank it out of my hand, which it could very well do. We're doing quite well on the thickness. So we can just proceed on down. To make you feel better, you can put the tool rest in there. There will be certain places where that's going to be a little bit advantageous, but for the most part, you could leave it straight across. You wouldn't have to move the tool rest in there. So we'll just go back and do the same thing we did. Now, once you get to this point, now we've got to start to pay attention to where our hand is at, where our left hand is at. Can never get up over the top of the tool rest, because that is right there at your hand. That edge, as you can see, I'll stop it, you can see this is only about 1/2 inch away from there. So if I'm screwing around and not paying attention to get my hand up over there, you're not going to be very happy. Once again, it's another one of them things that you're probably only going to do at one time. So it needs to go a little bit deeper before we curve. And that's about as far as I can go with that 40-degree gouge, because it does not like to go around that corner into end grain. So we'll switch back to our swept background gouge. And I'll sort of flatten this out. Because it's sort of easier, for me, I find it to be easier to make that sort of flat right there at this point. And then we can work on making the curve from there. You seem to make a lot less funnels that way. I need to get behind the cut, the last cut, so that I can pick it up. Let's slow down in the middle because the middle is moving considerably slower than the outside. And we'll just make nice little cuts straight across the middle. And cut through the center. Don't push the center piece off. Better off, I usually leave a little nub sticking up there. That little nub disappears in a really big hurry when you start sanding, versus if you were to make an indentation. Now we can feel with our fingers. We have a little bit of a hump right there, which is almost kind of standard for me to have a little bit of a hump right there. So we'll go back. That gouge is now seeing a couple miles of chips. I'm just going to grab another one that's already sharp. Same size. And we know we got to pick up our cut somewhere up and about there. So we'll find our bevel. Make one nice simple little cut right straight to the middle. And if you're paying attention with the top view, that's why I leave the top view on. That gouge started out over here and ended up the whole way over here in order to maintain the bevel contact the whole way through. And it's all done with your right hand. Nothing, I could just let go of it with my left hand and just follow the contour with my right hand. So that feels pretty good. There's definitely a little lump or two in there, but I don't imagine it's really not worth going after with a scraper. I've been watching a bunch of Richard Raffin stuff, and he just loves his scraper. This is a traditional ground scraper. I usually use the negative rake. I'm really seriously thinking of doing this. This is a big, heavy bowl scraper. So it needs to be on center, cutting on center. It doesn't want to be below. We need to raise the tool rest just a little bit. And then we'll try and get rid of those lines and see whether it's heat. I don't know how he does what he does, but he's been doing it for 30-some years or something like that. And maybe he's using all woods that are really, really hard. Although this stuff is actually hard enough that it didn't, a lot of times it wants to pick the grain up. And that I don't want. So now I'm playing around. Now I have a little bit of a hump in there, but it's doing well. wood is redbud, an ornamental tree. Scraper is from Packard Wood Turning Tools. I bought this at a public sale. These dumb things are expensive, especially when they're that thick. They're yeah, very expensive. So it is high-speed steel from Sheffield, England. Now, I'm not gonna run out and buy a Thompson in that. I do have some other ones. Yes, it is. It's probably close to 3/8 of an inch thick, would be my guess. Maybe not quite 3/8. This is shaded less than 3/8, so it's probably, seeing as how it's made in Sheffield, it would be metric. So 6, 7, 8, about 9 millimeters thick. They're not very long, and they're only 6 inches long, but they're not meant to be. I mean, as thick as what it is, you could probably actually run it the whole way over the tool rest. Just make sure that if it gets ground, if I like I say, I got to find some other ones that I have that aren't ground in a negative Rick fashion, and go back and try to use the traditional scraper. But the traditional scraper always has to head downhill. So the minute you decide you want to look and you drop your handle, as soon as this starts to go uphill into the wood, it will catch. And it is less than exciting. I'll put it to you that way. It does some really, really interesting things. Actually, I have a box scraper that's traditional ground. So this is another one. This is a thick one too. This is meant to do like lidded boxes and things like that. That's why there's an angle over here and it's swept around, so you can go into a lidded box and go right down the wall and across the bottom. This one's made by Thompson, which this one actually is fairly expensive. Has Jimmy Clue's name on it, but it's a Thompson tool. But this, if you were to get, let me move the tool rest. I could even show you what things they will not do. So if this comes in basically at a negative angle, if it's facing downhill, and it's not downhill a lot, it's just a little bit downhill. So it's really all it's doing is cutting on this edge. This edge needs to have a burr on it, even a non-negative rake. It still needs a burr. That's what still is cutting. But the second that you would drop the handle, level, depending on whether there's end grain involved in it, but if it goes uphill at all, whatever the bevel angle is down here, and I see some people, I think Richard Raffin even talks about it. I think he said he has a 40-degree bevel on this, which makes it a really, really sharp edge up here. But the second that you get it uphill at all, it's going to dig in, and it will not release until it pulls the tool down far enough that it becomes a negative angle, which, like I say, it can be rather exciting. I don't know. I'm sort of a fan of the negative rake myself. I just think it's idiot proof. This dumb thing does have a little crack developing right there. I do not like that, because that crack comes down here and goes into there. But we'll put it off into a paper bag and let it dry for a couple weeks. Although I was working in the closet yesterday, and the wife was working some more in it. I have a microwave that I had we used to use for camping, and I've never tried drying stuff in the microwave like that, but I think we're going to have a go at it. Let's see, we'll put our date on there, 6/11/23, Mulberry. I don't know if there's 2 L's or 1 L. I have to look that up when we get to that point of finishing it. Nothing finer than using a pyrography pen and burning burning the type of wood in there to figure out that you spelled it wrong. So we have a second one of those to do. Same way. Get the tool rest out of the road before I whack my hand on it. I tried the alcohol once. Keyword, once. For one, it's very expensive. I don't know if you've priced denatured alcohol right now. I just looked about a week ago, I was down at our nice hardware store we have down the street here. Just out of curiosity. Well, whenever I decided I would play with it a little bit, yeah, you got the expense of buying the alcohol, and like I say, right now, the denatured alcohol's about $25 a gallon. So, and you got to buy at least a gallon. To do something that small, of that size, wouldn't be so bad. You need a bucket to put it in. Yeah, the last I bought it was like 16. I shouldn't say I was surprised. I really wasn't overly surprised. So this is another one, same thing. The other half, basically, this is the other half of the log. This is actually a little bit shallower because the pith was offset in it. This also has some little checks in it too. This basically is sat around too long. I'm going to use my thumb and eyeball where this top point is. Keep my thumb out of the road. Man, I could do that 10 times if I tried. Close enough. So we're going to find where our closest point is. This is just kind of hacked off on the bandsaw. I don't cut when they're this small, I gave up cutting them corners off. For one, I don't want the little pieces. It's easy enough for me to get rid of the chips. I have a guy that takes them, no problem, no issues. Let's go back to strictly overhead. But if I cut the corners off, then I have to deal with the little itty bitty pieces of wood. Which I have somebody to take them, but it's just, it's just easier to take them off. I'm going to stand off and look to the left side of the headstock. And turn it on. It's going to be very slow. About 500 RPMs at that point. I'm going to bring the speed up until I get vibration, which is not going to be very far because I didn't do a very good job cutting them. So now we know it's about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch over the tool rest. Then we'll make a cut. A couple little cuts down here. You know what? I mean, there's all kind of stuff out there. There again, like the anchor seal and stuff like that, the seal end grain sealer. All that stuff of today has gotten so expensive. And so some of it's actually getting hard to find. I get wood and cut it. If I have a whole bunch of wood right now to cut. But, just two choices. You can use regular wood glue. Actually, wood glue actually works really well. Right. I don't know. I haven't been to the craft stores in quite some time. But I know there for a while, the kids were making, I think you have some kids. Maybe they're not old enough for that yet. They were making slime, what they called slime. And they were using Elmer's glue and something else. I don't know what the concoction was. But the Elmer's glue at like Hobby Lobby or one of those was like $12 or $15 for a gallon. And when you use it for an end grain sealer, most of the people who use that stuff talk about putting 25 to 50% water in with it. So, I mean, 1 gallon would make you, a gallon and a half or even 2 gallons. The only thing you're going to seal is the end grain. And it does soak in really well, especially when the wood is nice and wet. The only downfall is you can't, don't know that it would necessarily work real well to store it outside. You almost need to be in a shed or a garage or something. Any of the wood glues, it doesn't, like in my case, I do woodworking as well, so I have Titebond glue. Actually, I bought one of the Titebonds that were, I don't remember which one it was. It was one of their newer ones. I don't know. Was supposed to have a faster setting time, slower setting time. I don't remember what it was. I only bought like one of the small bottles, pint, whatever the bottle, 16-ounce bottle. And I didn't like it. I've kind of grown up using traditional Titebond. It's the extent of pretty much the last 30 or 35 years, so I've been taught pretty much from day one in woodworking and wood turning. If it's not broke, don't fix it. There's no point in. A lot of people like to keep trying different things all the time, which is okay, I guess. I should check this top one. But even at that, I just saw that because I'm about out of the regular Titebond. I was at Home Depot the other day, and a gallon of Titebond, and there again, most of that stuff, the bigger the quantity you buy, the cheaper it becomes. And I think it was still right around $20 or $25 for a gallon. So as far as an end grain sealer, I mean, that's still cheaper than the anchor seal that's up to, I think the last I saw that was like $40 or $45 a gallon. And I was, yeah, I know some of the guys at our turning club, some of those guys were buying the 5-gallon pail or something along those lines. And I had got some from one of the guys at one point, but there's a whole lot of cheaper options out there. Like you say, the latex paint. You're gonna, either way you do it, at least for me, either way I do it, for the most part, I'm cutting my logs at 18 inches long. I have a chainsaw with a 20-inch bar, so that's about what I can get out of the bar. So all the logs, if I cut them, they're all going to be cut at 18 inches long. Get rid of the pith. I mean, granted, these little peewee ones, I generally would just try and go straight down through them, through the pith. But once you get a log that's anywhere from 12 to 36 inches in diameter or whatever. Then I'm going to take a nice 1 inch, 2 inch, depending on the size of the log. What I have right now is stuff that's about 12 or 14 inches in diameter. Snow white walnut, which if I do any streaming later on, I'm on vacation this week, so you might see me more than one night this week. I might do some more of that, but it literally has, let's see, some of the logs are about that big, smack dab in the center. That's the chocolate brown color. Everything else is white. This as snow white is what this is. So I don't know. My forestry guy, he got it from me, so got it for me. You can't, if it would have been something that I'd have been with him or whatever and went to cut some of the stuff down, it probably would have stayed where it was at, but he thinks it's neat. So, and he gets a lot of the bowls back because I'll make them and finish them, and then they go right back to him, and then he gives them away at their forestry stuff. So I have several of them that are drying. I have several more to do. You can tell I came home basically with 2 truckloads. Not super heavy, not super big load. Big enough. But all the logs are cut at about 5 feet long. They're actually sitting in the back of my backyard. Still, this one has a little crack running across there too. So we'll see where that one's going to go. But they're going to stay, at least for now. Most of them are going to stay in the log form. And then all I will do from there is when I want to turn something out of them, then I'll just go down and cut off the split end part, because I have somebody that's more than willing to take all that wood. So I just take that little bit off of the end. It's usually about 2 or 3 inches, depending on how long it sits there. Cut whatever blank out of it that I want, and then just leave it alone. And I don't seal them. They're not, as far as I'm concerned, they're not really worthy of going to the trouble of sealing them and trying to preserve those logs. Guess we could actually go back to the other way, because they're not, another one of them things that we'll get around to it one of these days. Of course, now it's become summertime for us, so now it's a little warmer. So we'll make that somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch. And it's really not a whole lot of fun to be out there with a chainsaw in the summertime. So now we got to get a shape to it. It actually looks like I can see as it's spinning, I can see there's still a flat on the top. It doesn't really look like a very good shape either. We'll work with it a little bit and see what we get. Because I don't want the sides to be straight. I want it to be a nice curve. Gentle curve, bottom to top. That's just the that's the OBS. I'd actually have to go in and look. I think it's actually the automatic one. I think there was a little bit of something else to go with it. But I think, I don't know if it'll let me look at that. I think it will. Let me look. It's sure asking me technical questions. Audio. Huh. General. And since they do all these updates on this thing all the time, it's not really showing me much of anything. Couldn't do advanced. Huh. Yeah, well, I'm not necessarily a computer nerd to start with, so that's interesting. I know my son-in-law is sort of a computer guy. I know we worked with it to get it. For one, the headset is a noise canceling headset too. That's the aftershocks from OpenCom, something like that. And it has noise canceling capabilities to it as well. So I get just a little closer to the foot. Some of this I can actually go back after the fact when it dries, because this tenon is probably is really too big of a foot. If you go with the official golden rules and golden mean, no, actually I guess it wouldn't be thirds. That's 2 inches versus 6 inches across the long points. So that's about where it should be. I'm just looking to see. It looks to me like it could be a little bit straight sided. So if I take a simple hot melt glue stick, put it at the bottom, one finger on it, and pull it around to the top, it shows you, oh, this one's actually, there we go, shows you what the shape looks like. More so, it shows you more of the shape, and it also shows you where there's high spots and low spots, and in this case there's a huge low spot right there. So we do need to take a little bit more off of the bottom. and just feather it out into nothingness to the top. And then we're going to take a look at it again. Once this gets finished, or once it's dries, then this will get turned, this tenon part will get turned into a bead. This will get run right down into that corner. So, I mean, some of it's going to go away then, if it doesn't crack to pieces, because there's 2 little cracks in that one. It's kind of disappointing. The way I do these, I'm going to make this as much of a finished cut, everything that I can. That's not in the right place. I'm going to shear scrape a little bit up here at the top, because that extra cut left me a little bit of an area that's not so nice. Tool handle is way down at my hip, or way down below my hip. And all I'm doing is just gliding across. I'm still going to go in the right direction now. I don't want to go both ways. You see, a lot of people do. It gives you really, really tiny little fine angel hair shavings. But it can save you a whole lot of time sanding down the road. Because like I say, these will be done just like the last one. They're done complete at this stage, and they will warp as they dry. I think that looks okay. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit harder to visualize. You really need to put the glue stick up a little bit higher on it and see whether we got any. So we've gotten rid of our little dip that we had in there. So that's good. This will get rid of, and I probably could actually get rid of it right now. I gotta switch spindle gouges. I was working on some little ornaments for my wife the other day. I thought that spindle gouge looked a little dainty. That is the one that Cindy Drozda has her name on. It's still a Thompson tool. It's the deep fluted 3/8 inch bowl gouge, or spindle gouge. Don't necessarily want to use it for doing this kind of work. Spindle gouge, even though I'm working on a bowl, the cutting edge tool. Should allow me to cut back into that corner, because I really don't necessarily, especially a bowl of this size, I don't really necessarily need a flat spot down there. Those jaws will register on that little ledge. So that's also going to give me a better idea what the foot's going to look like. I could leave it like that. You could leave it as sort of a dovetailed kind of a foot. Just looking to make sure, and it did pick the grain up a little bit there. There's nothing says we can't use our spindle gouge the same way as I did the bowl gouge and do basically a shear scrape. Or you could even pick up a scraper. That would be a negative rake scraper in my case. And it's not that thick, so I want to make sure that it's at least up close to center line. It can be a little above center line. This has a sharp point on it, so it'll allow me to get into that corner. And we already determined on the other one that this is a cooperating kind of a wood for, oh yeah, right. There's generally what you get. I don't know if that, let me see. I don't know that I can actually get in there far enough. It'll go off the screen. Yeah, but you can see the difference in color. You can see this is white right there versus dark right there. That's all grain that's picked up because of the scraper. It didn't like that, and that's all end grain right there, which would be very, very difficult in a couple months from now to sand out. So, I mean, it worked on the outside. And the other thing that some of them do will hold the scraper up on its edge like that. I'm not that one. I've done it already, but I also attended a talk this afternoon, and they were talking about, you know, some of the people show things that could be dangerous to the wrong person or to some people. To me, that's one of them. Can't say that I've ever had a catch doing it. Like I say, if you watch any of Richard Raffin's stuff, and he's doing a whole bunch of stuff right now, he is very, very good. But as far as I'm concerned, he does some things that I wouldn't show people to do that you could do. For one, he uses a spindle gouge. I don't want to do that yet. For probably half or 3/4 of his work. Welcome aboard there, dear builder man. We're just a goofy wood turner. At least that's what we do on stream. I should put it that way. I do some woodworking kind of stuff as well. Actually, I've done more woodworking stuff over the course of my life than I have turning. But this is what happens when you have that 40-couple-year-old. What did my wife call that? Changing of desires, or I worked in a warehouse for 28 years. Drove a forklift. Paid the bills. And then downsizing caught up to that, and the company that I worked for, we started to jockey our own trailers around, and which meant, because we had to go out on a public road for all the way to half a mile, or if that, but you needed to be licensed to do that, to drive a commercial vehicle, even though it was only a jockey wagon. It's still considered a commercial vehicle. So we changed I got my CDL. They paid the bill to get it. And then the older gentleman that taught me at that point, he's like, if you wanted to do this on the weekends or whatever, he said you could get a job doing it. So I pursued that, and now that's what I do for a living. And I drive for UPS, which has been, they're not the easiest company to work for. But they do have very good medical benefits, but my medical benefits are actually through the Teamsters. But they do pay well, so that's what we do. So it didn't give me much time. It doesn't give me much time to do cabinet work. I mean, like working in the building? Because actually, that's going to be my next move, is to actually go and jockey. I do jockey now, right now, even just on Saturdays. But I think for the winter, I'm going to take a jockey bid, just to get a break from the road, because they've been there for 15 years. And being on the road anymore is, how do you want to put it? Less than fun. People were just very rude. I mean, I'm doing a run right now that I drive 180 miles in one direction. That's pretty much my job. I drive, if you were to look at a map, I drive from Middletown, Pennsylvania to New Stanton, Pennsylvania, which is just shy of Pittsburgh. Go out there and eat my lunch. Most days I have to wait for my loads to get there to come back. And then I come back and go home. That is very simple. But it is Tuesday through Saturday. Which I don't mind working a Saturday. Because I'm done early. I'm done in about 8 or 9 hours on Saturday, versus more like either 10 or 11 Monday through Thursday. And I started at 8 o'clock in the morning, so come Saturday evening, which is the part that, everybody says, oh, you work Saturday. I'm like, yeah, but, what do you want to do on Saturday? You want to go out for dinner or, do whatever kind of stuff like that. Why, I'm still home in time to actually do a fair amount of stuff on a Saturday evening. So it has been pretty nice as far as that goes. But I can't do it, I won't do it in the wintertime. And it's not because of that is one of the places that you will run into a lot of weather, a lot of snow. You get out in western Pennsylvania. I've done it before, years ago. But you make all this stuff all year long, you got to have somewhere to get rid of it. Well, that's when all the craft shows and we only do 2 or 3, and they're all in the fall. And the ones that we do, you set up on Friday night, and then you go sell your wares on Saturday. Well, with a Tuesday through Saturday job, then I would have to take off. Then I would have to take off 2 days. Because I'm not necessarily guaranteed to get done early enough on Friday night. And yes, it is the Christmas crowd. That is exactly what you're looking for. Actually, when it comes right down to it, we have never yet to do a summertime craft show. For one, most of them are outside. We did one, my daughter and I did one. It was in the fall. It wasn't a summertime one. It was early in the fall, like September area, something like that. And like I say, we did one. That was pretty much enough for me. It was a pain in the ass as far as I was concerned. It was a 1-day show, which is all it needs to be, as far as I'm concerned too. But, you get up, come Friday evening, I think I took off Friday. So you're going to load all the stuff up in the truck. And now it's outside. So now you got a canopy, which we already had the canopy for a different reason. And there again, most of the spaces are 10 by 10. So I have a 10 by 10 canopy just for that. Because it was something that my wife did with that stuff. So you go set up and I think it was from like 8 to 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And I mean, we sold some stuff, but it wasn't, it really, as far as I was concerned, it wasn't worthy of the time that we spent to do it. And it could have rained. That's the real one there for me. You know, what do you do when it rains? What a pain in the ass. So that was that was pretty much it. That we do 2 shows. The 2 that we do, one's in a high school, the other one's in a, I think it has something to do with the church or something along those lines. Both of which we've done now. If we do them both, well, I know we're doing at least the one. This will be the 3rd year that we've done those shows at those places. So if you go back to the same places, there's an advantage to that because people remember you for one, and they'll come and look for you at those shows, even though the one's not very big. The one in the high school is actually a pretty good sized show as far as attendance goes and vendors and all that. But that one I share a booth with one of my wife's friends. My wife does decorative painting. So and after we get the 2 shows done, then I'll usually be when well, let's see, he'll be 90 this year. He's a retired forester. He's the one that got me all the walnut and has gotten me tons of wood over the years. And he's a wealth of knowledge. If I run across something that somebody's given me a piece of wood or something or other, you know, it's always nice to know what it is. But usually if I don't know what it is, and I will see him at some point, I just take it along with me and show it to him, and he generally can tell me, you know, exactly what it is. I mean, it's an advantage to have. I'm looking when I'm looking at it, stop and making sure my hand is back here, even though it's out of the picture, because I'm very careful as to where that corner is at. That would be a meat grinder. So we don't want to do that. And then generally after the 2 craft shows, then I will get with him, or he'll get with me, one of the 2. Usually the latter of the 2. He'll usually call me. He says, "What do you got for me?" I'm bring you the biggest box you want. The other year, I think he took almost everything I had. I think he took like 30 pieces, 25, 30 pieces, finished pieces with him. Because he goes to the Forestry Association, has big fancy, really expensive dinners and people with deep pockets and all that stuff. So they get a bunch of stuff. I am cheating on this one a little bit. I'm going to go back and see if the scraper will allow it. Will it cut cleanly? No. Did not. Not at all. But in the same token, what it's doing, when I run my fingers down through here, I'm feeling what it feels like. And I'm coming down. It's got a nice gentle slope, matches the outside, but right about here, it's flattening out and going across the bottom, which I don't like. So I'm going to continue with the scraper, even though it's not cutting it well. I'm going to get the shape what I want it to be. And then I'll go back and make one final cut. And we'll cut it cleanly. Because the scraper is standing a grain up right there in the bottom. Oh, thank you for the follow there, Junk Collector. So now when I run my fingers down there and I say, okay, that's pretty good. You got to be careful because I don't want to get, because we're not sure about the foot. I'd like to be more sure about the foot than what I am. So there's the bottom. So we could take a little bit more out of that. In the very, very center. Makes life a whole lot easier to sand if everything is curved in there. So we'll make that a little bit deeper, blend it up into the sides. And that feels pretty good. And you can see, should be able to see, get the light in the right place, maybe. No. Usually you can see, I can see from where I'm at. There's a definite line where I stop scraping, as in the coloration of the wood. So what we'll do, we'll make one little fine cut. This is actually a bottom bowl gouge that I picked up. I could just use a swept back grind bowl gouge, and I probably should, because it is still sharp. Should be sharp enough for that. I could take it. I could also throw things on the floor. I could also take and hone it a little bit. I'm right-handed, and I need that side. So if I lay the bevel up, lay the bevel on the hone, make it contact, and just do a couple little circles, just right there at the tip. And that gave me a tiny little shiny line right up across there. And don't run your finger across like I just did. I was using my fingernail, because right there, that is sharp enough to slice you. Quite easily slice you. And did we sharpen the right side? No! I was so worried about showing you. I sharpened the wrong side. This will put a nice, really fine edge right there. Not something I'm going to do as I'm turning, generally. Generally, I'm just going to go grind it. What I'm going to use is 3 fingers, or 2 fingers up around it that way. All I want to do is put pressure down. I don't want to put any pressure against the sidewall. And wiggle back and forth as soon as I get a shaving. We're going to make a shaving. Handle's coming around and around and around. And I moved the tool rest up for the scraper and never moved it back down. That's why I left a little nub in the very bottom. Because as my tool came around, I'm up level and I'm above center. Nothing wrong with that cutting-wise until you get to the very center. Because otherwise, I would have to lift the handle up. And now, as soon as I lift the handle up, the wood has the advantage on the tool. Chances are right there it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference, but it could pull it down. Because if the wood has the advantage, it will win 9 times out of 10. Always give it a spin. I changed something, even though I shouldn't have done anything to move things out of the road, out of whack. Come on, behind it. There we go. And that's it. Should be cut nice and cleanly. There's a tiny little bit right there. I probably should go back after that, because I didn't get quite high enough. There's a definite white line. And you'll notice that the white line doesn't go the whole way around. That's because that white line is pure end. That's the end grain right there, from about there to there, and it'll be on both sides. So that's not cut very as clean as it could be. So that means more sanding. I don't want to do that. I don't want more sanding. I want less sanding. So we're going to pick up our cut one more time. Making the very, very fine cuts like that is probably harder than anything. But I don't have a ton of material, or else I would just make an 1/8 of an inch cut and be done with it. But I want to make that cut from top to bottom, or starting point to finishing point. Otherwise, I will leave a line wherever I stop at. And as you can see by the shavings, they're very, very like pencil sharpener type shavings when you do it that way. So now we're clean. There's still there's little ridges in here. I'm not trying to feed you a line of crap with that. There's still ridges there. There's tool ridges. You almost really can't get away with them. Get away from them. At least I don't. But you know, that's just a matter of, yeah, generally speaking, I start with 120 grit paper to start with. It's just, that's what I have always done. And there's a lot of professional turners out there, people that I've taken classes with and stuff like that. It's like there's no shame in that. Even if you have to go coarser than that. I don't want to go coarser than 120, but I don't. This stuff is not super wet. Let's try something. Probably won't work, but it's worth a try. Because if I could sand it now, it would be easier than later. Because right now it's still round. Sort of. It has already moved. Because when I come back up here and pick up that cut, it's chattering up here. So it's no longer perfectly round. It's too wet. Yeah. When you do it when it's too wet, it just gums up the sandpaper. So it's not really worth the effort. You know, just let it dry and go from there. What's up, Shanigans? So that's our two little guys done. Time is it? 7:40. Oh, it's only 8 o'clock. We could do another one. I'll probably be disappointed in them. They're going to crack. They may get the microwave treatment tomorrow. That's another one of them things that if you go onto YouTube and look up people that dry bowls and turning stuff in a microwave, a lot of these people, or the most of them that I found, first off, there's not a whole lot of them out there. This dumb thing has a crack right across there. Not a good place for it to be either. Could be a design opportunity. These usually when they're very, very small like that, they'll usually, as it dries, a lot of times these will close up and you won't even be able to find them. Where's it going? Oh, the microwaving thing. Those, most of what I found on YouTube, they talk about either using 1 minute on defrost or like 30 seconds on full power. And old Richard Raffin had one of his little videos out the other day, and he was talking about it. Well, he showed one of them that he was doing. He turned it green, just like that, just like what I did. Took it over and put it in the microwave for 2 minutes on high, on full power. And I'm like, wow. Because you got to watch, because you could catch them on fire. Because that's one of the things that somebody talked about on YouTube was, you know, you don't want to start the microwave or hit the wrong button and you could have a fire in your microwave. But he did them for 2 minutes on high. He brought it out. It's totally steaming and carrying on. He took a tool, laid it down, and put it up. So he said that way the air gets underneath everything. What did he say he did with it? 2 minutes. Left it dry. Let it cool for... How long did he say? He didn't say how long he left it cool, but he left it cool completely for like an hour or 2 hours or something like that. Come back, did it for another 2 minutes, left it dry, left it cool off for another hour or two, and come back and did it for 90 seconds after that. And the bowl was very, very much deformed, which is kind of neat, but it was dry in one shot. Yeah, well, that too. I mean, it definitely, like I say, the microwave that I'm going to use is one that we had way back when we were camping. So it won't be, you don't want to use the one that you're going to use in your house to make your food. Because yes, depending on what the wood is, you could have a serious aroma to it. Trying to think what I was going to do. I actually have some stuff to finish. Because we were talking about that. These are really little guys. These are some little English walnut bowls. Since I was started down that road of how I go about what will happen with those two once they dry. These are not the world's greatest example. I should have left a little bit deeper of a tenon on it than what I did, but it is what it is. So we're going to deal with what we got, and it will grip the tenon just fine. It is definitely nowhere near round enough to be able to spin it and cut it, recut anything. So that's schools, two different schools' philosophies in doing some of this stuff. Number one, I mean, this size bowl, I'm never going to leave it thick. That size of a blank probably would dry if you left it on the shelf for a couple years. Wood generally takes an inch a year plus a year. So, you know, if this thing is 3 inches thick, it's going to take roughly 4 years for it to air dry. If you had a kiln, you could dry it quicker. Problems with kilns is there's a real science and art. Most people call it an art that deal with lumber or deal with wood, drying wood, I should say. Got to get some chips out of the road so I can bring my dust collector hose over. Because what can happen when you're drying wood in a kiln, put it that way. Most kilns are like dehumidification kilns. there's some really fancy ones out there now that are vacuum kilns. But if you dry the wood too fast, too hot, it becomes what they consider case hardened. So it becomes very hard to work with, very brittle. So like I say, when it comes to lumber and things like that, there's a real art to it. And it's not something you're gonna, kind of the backyard kind of thing to do. And you can spend quite a bit of money in buying a really nice, fancy moisture meters and all that good stuff. Yeah, it's like I say, there's a real science to it. $120 grit paper. As you can see, I don't spin it because it's too much out of round. I'm using a soft pad. I'm not putting a ton of pressure on the pad, just enough to get it to conform to the surface. I'm not spinning the drill wide open either. Heat is not our friend. Mainly in this case, it'll ruin the pads for one. These foam pads like that, they don't like the heat. And the dumb things are expensive. That little orange pad there, I think the last I bought any of them, they were like $7 or something like that. So I try not to ruin them. Try and get them to last a while. And I'm going to clean it each time. Just a paintbrush. I want to make sure that because there's always grit comes off of sandpaper. So I don't want to leave 180 grit little pieces of grit on there and then come back, go to 220 to find out that I created 180 grit scratches again. You've got to be careful when you get out the very top edge of there. This size bowl, I almost need about 1.5 inch pad rather than a 2-inch pad. Of course, those pads there are actually 2 3/8. We're at 220. Nothing says that I can't use a little bit of hand sandpaper too and go with the grain. But I do have to get rid of the scratches because this will get a shiny finish. And the shinier the finish, the more sanding you need to do, the more vigilant sanding you need to do. If you were just going to put a, I don't know, a lot of people use like the Danish oil, or Richard Raffin uses the linseed oil and beeswax, which is kind of an interesting finishing thing. I've done a couple pieces with it. That's what I do my trees with, for one. Very simple to use. Yep. You got to teach that CNC not to leave the milling marks in the bottom. That was 320. Yeah. That's 400. I think on the inside of this one, I do have 600 grit paper. I think I will hit that with a little bit of 600. Seems like I'm leaving some scratches in the very bottom. But for me, in the woodworking world, CNC would probably be the absolute last thing that I would ever even think of considering to buy. I don't have any use. I really don't have any use for one. And if I was doing production work, there's other methods that are actually faster than the CNCs. But I'm an old man with old school thoughts, so. So we're going to use our paper towel to clean it. I think what I'll do, I have 2 of these to do. I think I'll go ahead and finish the inside here. And then I'll flip it around. I'll do the other one, then we'll flip it around. Yeah. Well, it's the CNCs for the happy home shop. I mean, that's just, to me, it's kind of a marketing ploy. And they're doing a really good job at marketing that stuff and making some that are affordable to the average person. Like I say, there's a lot of other things out there that if you're in the production world, yes. but they're quite expensive for a fun little home project. Yeah, if you ever get the opportunity to go into a full scale production facility, now that of today, a lot of it depends on what that production facility is making. I had a relative that had a production facility, and they did a lot of Victorian fretwork kind of stuff, as well as other stuff. So they had one of the an overarm pin router, which is a giant size table. Table's probably 3 foot square, something like that. There's a pin that comes up from the bottom. You put a pattern on the piece, and most of the stuff they were doing, they could actually screw that pattern right to some of the waste wood. And you stepped on a pedal, and there was a spiral. It was only like a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch bit, spiral straight bit, come right down through it, and all that person did was around there, and it was done. Very smooth, very clean, and very fast. You know, there was no. That would be where, to me, that would be the hang up on some of the CNC stuff, is you almost got to be like a computer genius to figure out what to tell it to do. And this is my finishing method. This is the Parfix 3408, which is a slow setting CA glue. Very thin. Put it on. Yeah. That's good old Donnie. He'll never quit working. Business went out, though. As my dad would be quick to tell you, he would be like my third cousin or something like that. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's definitely the way some of that stuff is going. Yes, exactly. That's more the people that are using the CNCs, is the people doing cabinet work, like kitchen cabinet work and things like that. You know, one little shot of accelerator. That's all it takes. Nice high satin shine. This will get buffed once it's cured, which will be tomorrow. I'm going to sit this one off to the side. We'll do the inside of the other one, and then I'll put it onto a jam chuck, and then we'll finish the bottom. I have two of them. Yeah. They are English walnut too, if I didn't tell you that, which is really pretty wood. And it doesn't, the English walnut, I had no reaction to the English walnut. The black walnut, I have to be very careful when it comes to doing work with dry wood and black walnut. It just closes me up to beat the band. So that's pretty much telling me that I'm sort of allergic to it, I guess. This English walnut, I didn't have any issues with it at all. I've never really done any cabinet work in walnut, pretty much just for that reason. And the fact that anybody I ever dealt with, they didn't want to spend that kind of money. that was most of my day today. Was spent. I got a dresser to build for my granddaughter that hasn't arrived in this world yet, but I'm building a dresser from scratch for her, and it is all hard maple because that's what I have. What my daughter picked. So that was probably, I don't know, 4 hours worth of work, something like that, just to glue up, get everything ready and glue up 3 panels, the 2 end panels and the bottom panel for it today. So it is very time consuming to do it that way. But the last cabinets that I made for my daughter a little while ago, I made her basically a work table or countertop and 2 banks of drawers for her craft room. And I got the plywood. You know, I had the boxes made, which I've always made all that stuff out of plywood, cabinet grade plywood. But nowadays, the stuff you get is not very dry. When you got to be willing, if you're going to do small, you're going to do that kind of work, period. You got to be willing to be a little bit diverse and pretty much do whatever somebody is willing to pay you to do, to make. Because for the most part, you're going to do all, at least for me, everything I've ever done was always, you know, sort of a one of a kind, whether somebody sees a picture or something like that in a magazine or something, and go from there. There again, the hardest part about doing some of that kind of stuff for other people is coming up with a fair price for both ends, for your end and their end. Yeah, I mean, if that's what you want to do for a living, I mean, there's a guy in town here that was doing a bunch of that. Oh yeah, it's all expensive anymore. Nope. I was at our local woodcraft store, I don't know, a month or 2 back. Went over there for something or other. My wife was along. She stayed in the car. I come back out, and I'm going to go look at different stuff that they have. Of course, they're one of them now. They're a Saw Stop retailer too. I can't say that I've ever really priced the one ways. The one ways were One ways used to be cheaper than most people thought they were. So you're spending that much money on a one way, you're getting the very, very big one. I mean, a robust, there's no doubt about it. They're a well-made machine, but I can't see that kind of money for them. Yeah, like everybody else. There's one of the old guys in our turning club. He's now old enough that he's actually went into a retirement home. He had one of the big one ways. I think it had a 24-inch swing. The bed was probably like 6 feet long or something like that. Huge machine. Not really sure why he had such a big machine, because he never really did much real big work. But yeah. A lot of people like the Powermatic. They're very, very popular throughout the turning world. But I don't. Of course. Well, when you make $250,000 or $500,000 a year, why? What's the point in having something? Well, yeah, I tell you what I don't like about the Powermatics, and I've turned on them several different times. The headstock on the Powermatics is so big that to me they get in the road. And once again, are they worth, I don't know, the 34, whatever it is, 34C, I think it is. You know, they're up to about $5,000 or something like that now too. So, you know, are they worth that kind of money? I guess a lot of it has to do with what you intend to use them for. You know, if your thing that you like to do, or try to make a living doing it, or try and I shouldn't say make a living, but make some money doing it, and you're going to you're on Instagram. Let me think what his name is. He's in Pennsylvania. He has taken it very seriously, and he's doing the majority of what he does is like 18 or 20 or 18, 20-inch bowls. That's safer too. Yeah. There's no such thing as a cheap hobby. Everything's expensive anymore. Not me. I can't do a 20-inch. 18. This is an 18-inch lathe. That's the biggest I've ever done. And when it comes right down to it, even though it's an 18-inch lathe, I think at blank I started out at more like 17 or just a little over 17. I can have some fun with you on that one. I can show you that one because it's actually dry and ready to return. I can show you the difference. This is the measure here in a second. I think this one's about 5 inches tip to tip. It will totally get lost inside of that one. They say it's a very simple process for finishing for me. This is it. One coat and done. And then we do a little bit of buffing on it. But the shine that it shows up right there, since it's still a little wet, that's about what I'll get once it completely dries and cures, which will be 24 hours. And then we'll buff it inside and out. Let me get the big boy. I'll have to get some things out of the road. And we'll go back to overhead. And we'll have to widen things out a little bit. Mouse don't work very well with gloves, though. And get the dust hose out of the room. So there's the biggest bowl that to date that I have done. So now that it's dry, it was done January of 2022. Actually, January 2nd of 2022. This thing spent a year plus. It's too big for the paper bags, so I put it in a cardboard box, sealed, taped the lid shut in a cardboard box. I think I left it go like that for probably 6 months or so. And then I put some paper, shredding paper from the shredder inside this, on the inside of this, and down around the sides as well. Just so that what I was really trying to keep it from doing is drying out too fast. But I know when I first started this, it started out at like 17, maybe even 17 and a half. Because I had it cut. I cut it on the bandsaw. Because I do have a disc that's that big. Cardboard. I use cardboard. Poster or mat board. Picture frame mat board. And I have a circle cutter for doing round mats. So it will do the only downfall with that one is it cuts a bevel on the piece because it's meant to cut a picture frame mat. So it's cutting it at a 45. You know what? Maybe I don't have a disc that's that big. Well, that gives you that's a 15-inch disc. So that gives you an idea how much this thing has moved as it dried. So at 15 inches, we have about 1/4 of an inch there, and probably 3/4 of an inch, close to 3/4 of an inch on the ends. Yeah, close to it on on both ends. This was a project. This was probably 2 hours or so, maybe 3 hours. Because you can't spin it very fast. And it was solid. It was wet. I don't have a coring system, so I don't core bowls. Another one of them $500 investments. That's basically that's where you're going to start at when it comes to the coring of bowls. So that gives you an idea of the size difference between what I just finished versus this guy here. This guy's ready to be finished, ready to be returned. I haven't even put it up here to see what I'm hoping. My worst nightmare is probably right here, and we're still within reason. We're at 16.5 on the long side. Because after I did it, I'm like, what happens when wood dries, it always tries to shrink to the middle. So this would, theoretically, in this direction here, would be the long grain. If that was a tree standing up, that would be the long side of it. So it always shrinks from the long grain into the center. The center shrinks less. This is probably actually in the center. This is probably actually relatively true as compared to out in here. This one actually, let me sit this down before I do that. This one didn't, it's got a slight hump here. See if I can drop things all over the place here. Ah, come on, stand up here, cooperate. This doesn't work well with gloves on either. So there would be the, basically sort of the pith of the tree would be in the center. So it always shrinks to that. And that always, well, it's up about 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch. So this one really didn't do too bad as far as that went. Like I say, I have not tried to do anything more with it. By virtue, I really don't know what I'm going to do with it after I finish it. And the worst part of it is, I think I have 3 of them that size. Because there's 2 more. Yeah, there's 2 more birch. I think they're birch. They're actually over here in my shop because I redid some stuff in my shop, and now I have some shelves over here, and some of these big bowls that take up way too much room are over here. I didn't even write a date on the bottom of this one. That's always bad. But there again, size comparison wise, there's a white birch bowl. This one will be much easier to finish. This one would make a really nice sort of salad bowl type bowl. It does have a little bit of spalting in it, a little bit of a, I would say that's probably a mineral stain in it. But these take a lot of time to do. Take up a lot of room on the shelves and stuff such as that. I have I guess it was 2 weeks ago. I have another blank here to do. If I stream some other night this week, I'll probably do that one as well. This is also some more white birch. This is a calabash style bowl. It's totally round. There is a tiny little flat down here in this bottom. This one was done green, done wet. This is my great example on how much this stuff moves. It was done to final thickness, just like the little ones. It's 10 inches in diameter on the long side. It's about 9 3/8 on the short side, and has a very much a pronounced hump as it comes up around here. This one, the only thing that's left to do to this one is sand the inside, more so up in the rim. The outside of this, I think, has been totally sanded. These I use a vacuum chuck to hold it. You could just use something soft down here and put it on a jam chuck and sand it at a real slow speed. That way the sander actually can sort of bounce up and over. Or you could sand it by hand, use sandpaper to sand them. This one will not get sanded through like 400 grit paper. This one will probably get sanded, probably stop at like 320. Just mainly get rid of all the scratches, and then this one will probably get finished with mineral oil and beeswax maybe. It's been sitting around for quite a while. It's one of the pieces that I keep looking at and say, I need to get it finished. They're a fun bolt. They're actually a harder bolt to do because of the round bottom. But they're neat when they're done, and they will sell. Okay. Since we're at curiosity stage, how I would go about that, the right one, gonna look a little bit Mickey Mouse. I would use the bigger, I do have the same thing for the bigger chuck, but the size of the chuck really doesn't make any difference. This is just a jam chuck. This is resin, so it never moves. It's just as round as the day that I started. You can make these out of wood. The problem with the wooden ones, they move over time, and you have to keep redoing them. I can't have the banjo there, though. Reason I say I couldn't have the banjo where it was at, the bowl was actually hitting it. Which is really the big, kind of the big challenge with the big bowls, is getting everything situated just to even be able to turn them. If you had to, if you had the giant size 24-inch lathe or even a 20, the 20s would be better than this, but and this thing is heavy. It's still heavy. This thing probably weighed in at about 25 pounds or so when I started it. It's probably down to about 10, maybe now. So that's it. Super slow speed to start, of course. But that's how this one will get finished up when we're energetic enough to do it. It has to switch belts too. But right now, all these bigger lathes generally have a 2-step pulley on them. A low-speed power pulley is in a high-speed pulley. Mine's generally almost always on the high-speed pulley. I don't do this size stuff very often, so I don't need the low speed torque that would give me. Just out of curiosity. You got me sidetracked. Oops. That's the other thing. You really have to pay attention to where things are at. And actually that one I think I'd have to use. These are actually robust tool rests, which I do like quite well. This is the original one that came with the lathe. This is actually the Laguna one. It's a copy of the robust. It has the hardened steel rod on the top. It's also I think they consider this one more a spindle turners because it's longer, has a bigger slope. It generally a lot of times gets in the road for me to do smaller bowls, especially when you go inside because it is so thick. So we'll get it. I don't want it close enough to where the bevel on my bowl gouge can drop off the edge. So a lot of people, that's one of some of the people that demonstrate and teach and stuff like that. The tool rest has to be as close as you can possibly get it. Well, I disagree with that statement, but depends on what you're doing. Now, let's grab our bowl gouge. And I primarily use 1/2-inch bowl gouges. I do have 5/8 as well, which probably a 5/8 is probably more the size that I would probably attack on this one, but I really don't need to. So like everything else, I'm going to bring it up till I get vibration, which in this case is about 700 RPMs. So if I go in and pick up a cut, and this may sound weird, but I'm not really looking what the tool's doing, because you know it's cutting, and you can see I'm more so looking up here, and you can see the line as it goes around up there. Come on, stop. That it's a broken line, so we're still not round. I'm only taking about 1/8 of an inch off of there. But what I would do with this is just sort of keep on going. The full gouge also needs sharpened. But basically on the outside, I want to take the minimal amount off, because we've done a good enough job. I'm happy with the shape of it. So now it's just a matter of bringing it back into a round shape. Unless you like the organic shape, then you could just take it. It would be very sort of big and chunky and clunky, and leave it at where it's at. We're still not quite round there. And I'm leaving lots of ridges. Like I say, the gouge is not sharp enough for this, because now this is ash. Ash is very hard once it's dry. So the tools need to be very sharp. We could even go after it from there with the 40-degree gouge, which probably is no sharper than that one. The 40-degree gouge, you have to be out far enough because it hits the tail spot. And it's not very sharp either. But we're basically, in a nutshell, we are actually true, mainly down in here. This needs a little bit more attention down in here. This is the size foot this thing is going to maintain. I may cut straight up in here and make this into like a beaded foot or something like that. And then we'll go from there as to whether this is actually a kind of a good candidate for doing the dye it black and then fill all the grain in with a colored grain filler. It would, one that size would probably really pop, I would say. But that's for another day. Just show you that it doesn't matter, really doesn't make a whole lot of difference on the size of the piece that you're working on. It's just a matter of same method, basically. Just on something like this, it's going to be a much slower process to get it back into a round shape, because that's about out in here, we're about 1/4 of an inch that we're taking off of it, and as we proceed up around, it's still not round, or it's still not true up there. So we know we need to take, according to our measurements, we know we need to take about 3/8 of an inch off of the long sides to get it back into true. But it'll get there one of these days. Just not today. And it's going to take up a ton of room on the table to go with it. You know, you take it to a craft show. I've had people ask for, don't you do anything bigger? Well, yeah. A young girl the other year at the high school one, she's like, well, that's not big enough. And I had one that was 10 or 11 inches with natural edge, which is mainly what I do. She's like, well, I want one that's like 12 or 14 inches. And I politely looked at her and I was like, here's my business card. Tell me what you want. I have stuff at home that would be of that size, which I did at that point. I had some that would have been dry. I just didn't get them done in time to take them to a show. And I don't take that many of the big ones along because they take up so much room. I mean, one like that one there, and probably the birch ones, I probably will take them along, but I'll probably only get like one of them out. And, if you get somebody that's looking at them and whatnot, that's, then you say, hey, I have other ones. I just don't have them out. So, back to our situation. We need a small ideally I would use a vacuum chuck on this. But if I was to pull a vacuum on that right now, chances are there's still CA glue that's down in the grain in here. And if I pulled a vacuum on that, it would suck it right back up to the surface. I'm kind of taking a chance even doing it this way, but that will work. And put my chuck away for nothing. As a friend of mine did, he lives in Hawaii. He does all big bowls, all big Hawaii, or mainly a lot of calabash bowls. And we're talking about a small bowl for him would be 18 inches. He does the stuff that's 20, 24 inches in diameter. He has a market for them. At least so he says he has a market for them. I wouldn't have a market for him because I know what he gets, or at least what he asks price-wise for them. Those 24-inch bowls are $700 to $1,000 a pop. It's all being done in Koa. But it's like, yeah, I would have one of them forever. Koa is nice to work with, though. I monitored a couple IRDs for him. My wife and I did. And he sent me some. Sent me a couple pieces of it. Turns really, really nice. It's sort of soft in some ways, but it worked very, very nice. It's very pretty when you get it done. So basically, now we went from giant size to little size. And we've done basically the same thing. We've put it in a jam chuck. You don't have to have a vacuum chuck for this stuff. It's just another expense. A lot of people have a vacuum pump because maybe they've done a little bit of resin casting or something like that. I originally bought the vacuum pump and some little stuff to go with it, mainly for doing this kind of stuff. This one, can we spin it? Question. We spin it really slow. Very gentle touch. It's bouncing, but it should be sanding it quite well. And I also did not go back to 120 grit paper. I started at 150. But you can do it the same way I did on the outside or the inside. You can do a lot more of this. A lot of this just sanding like this, basically by hand. Really, especially up along the bark edge. A lot of times the bark shrinks more. It's a crapshoot. It either shrinks more or less than the wood. So you really got to be sort of vigilant around the bark area to get it back to being flat. We could also sand it by hand, at least some of it. There, we can bring a speed up just a little bit. But I need to get down against that very bottom edge. You know, when you get up close to the rim, your finger starts to bounce more. So that's lightweight pressure, so that your fingers don't end up in the void. But these can be sanded almost just as easy, especially this size, without using the power sanding. And if you put too much pressure on it, it just spins. But when you do it by hand, then we're going to have to be a little bit more, we're going to go up to a higher grit with it. So that was 320. I also actually need to do a little bit more turning on it too. Almost forgot that. Because one of the classes I was in, actually I think it was with Jimmy Clues, he talked about having some sort of a foot. The foot doesn't have to be very high. It should be properly sized to the piece at about a third to one-third the diameter should be the foot. Just so that it sits up off of the table a little bit. That was his philosophy. And we need to go forward. Now we will bring the speed back up somewhat. We're up at about 1,000 RPMs. I'm going to clean this foot up because it does have chuck marks on it. Create spindle gouge. Go right into the bottom. Come up a little bit. I'm going to go back the other way. I'm going to go into that corner and drop the handle, and it'll make a nice little bead. And then we can take a little bit of the base away. And then we'll stop and take a look. And it did sort of stand that up a little bit because I went the wrong way. You got to think of it this way: when you're cutting on the outside of a bowl, it needs to go from the bottom to the top. Reason being, you take your finger, take 3 fingers, put it that way. If we're cutting in this direction, if this the end grain fibers of my 3 fingers, as I cut, boom, I hit this one. It's supported by the one behind it as well as there. So when you go off the top edge of a bowl, you need to go really slow or stop and come back that little bit at the top. So if we came this way, nothing is supporting this below that, and it chips the grain away. That's how it's always been explained to me. So I'm going to basically do a little shear scrape. and blend that little bit in up there, up through there. I should have done that before I did any sanding. Now we have a tiny little beaded foot. The only thing left we're going to have to do is get rid of that little nub in the bottom. And that's very easily put the, I have a sanding disc on a drill. I'll put it right in the headstock, and you can literally grind that off in a matter of a couple seconds. It's actually very easy to do. We'll go back to reverse. I sand in reverse because of dust collection for the most part. You can sand either direction. It just, as you can see, the dust goes right straight into the dust chute. Where if I was to sand in forward going towards me, the dust chute should be down below it. Otherwise, it comes back up around and it's hitting you in the face and everything else. Just a little bit of sanding on that little bead, and it becomes a nice rounded bead. As long as I can find a good sharp place on the sandpaper. And the cut edge of the sandpaper will get down in that groove. This is something I don't too often show. It's rather boring to watch somebody sand something. But when we sand like this, we are creating all the radial scratches around. That's why I say you have to go a lot higher in the grits, because we're going to need to get rid of those radial scratches. You can, there's something a little bit bigger where you can really keep the sandpaper moving. You get less of it, but they're still there. And like I say, when you put a shiny finish on it, if you put a shiny finish on it, it'll show quite quickly. Why starting out as a new wood turner or whatever, the ideal finish would be like a Danish oil or a beeswax type of finishes. Something that's dull. They don't show the imperfection. So that was 400. Go to 600. Get a nice massage on your fingers to do that too. And last but not least will be 800. I know some people that go up into the thousands sanding. I don't particularly care to do that. I don't think it's necessary, for one. So now that we're up to 800, I take our same sheet paper. I gotta take my glove off because it wants to slide on my fingers. Not to mention my fingers are sweating. And then we'll do a little random orbit with 800. This is pretty much the last step on almost everything I do. Will be this 800. As I spin this around, I'm looking for any scratches. Like right there's a scratch, there's a scratch, and those scratches are running concentric. So that was from sanding the way that I did. I might have to go back a grit or even two, because there's some fairly deep scratches right there. You can't see it on the screen. I don't think I could bring you in close enough, and I'll make you dizzy if I do. That's also why I use the bright lights. And these lights that I use to stream are not the really bright light. I have one of the lights on a mount that's really bright. So we'll go the whole way around, try and get down in this little groove the best that I can. You say to yourself the first time you do this, it's like, my God, you went from a shiny surface to a dull surface. But your eye cannot pick up these 800 grit little circles that you're creating. I think that's good. I got to go back to my gloves. Even though it's a slow setting CA glue, it's still super glue. Don't kid yourself on not using gloves to apply it. I see a lot of people that do. I don't particularly care to stick my fingers fast together or to something else. As you can see, the paper towel is a wonderful thing. Cleaning off the dirt. Other wonderful thing, I made a little bit of an investment on a remote control for the dust collector too. I bought some plywood, some scraps basically of plywood from he got them from some sort of cabinet shop. It's actually Canadian made plywood. He couldn't answer me where he could actually go and buy it, but he said this was some friend of his. He was in the cabinet world, is what he did for a living. And this was somebody that he knew from that. He's retired, the guy that I bought it from. But he had a whole bunch of it. Most of what I bought from him was actually end cuts. So the grain is really sort of running in the wrong direction. But the price was kind of right on them. I bought like $50 or $60 worth of it. Some really neat stuff. Actually, the camera won't go out far enough. I can show you a piece. I bought 2 pieces from him that were walnut veneered plywood. Real high-end walnut veneer. Very pretty stuff. They're going to be little fronts for the drawer boxes in my shop here. If I had a better way, I could give you a little shop tour of what we've done in the last umpteen months, but really don't have a very good way of showing that on the camera. Let me show you a little bit of it then. My shop is very small. It's in the basement of my house. So that kind of, some of that is, will depict on of what for finishes that I use, because it is in my house. I can't use a nitrocellulose, any of the cellulose lacquers. That stuff stinks to high heaven and sticks around forever. I know some people that do. The guy in town, that's all he uses. It's not the most healthy kind of stuff to use either, even with a respirator on. So we're just wiping off the excess, because I only want what soaks into the wood. I don't want any laying on the surface. What would lay on the surface would beat up like a well-waxed car. Or you try to put it on a second coat. With this particular one, cannot do a second coat. It'll just sit on the surface. If it can't soak in, it just sits on the surface and beads up. Good shake with the activator. Give it 1 spray, 2 sprays other side. All I got to do, all I'm after there is just to get it to start the polymerization process. And that's what the bottom looks like. We'll probably cheat on this some other day this week. Maybe if I come back down, well, I'm going to be down here all week, but if I stream some other night, I'll show you what. This is one way of doing it. By far the cheapest, easiest way, or the cheapest way. I'm not going to say it's the easiest way. It would be the cheapest way. All I have to do is deal with that little nub. That little nub would be taken care of with, zoom back out, just a disc, that's a 2-inch disc in there. It's in a Jacobs truck. Go right into the headstock, and boom, you can just grind that right off. You can run up through the grits if you want. I just generally use like 120 grit. I'll grind that down smooth, and then just take a little hand sandpaper and sand that little bit, and then put the type of wood on it and my initials, and that's it. It's all there is to it. And away it goes, hopefully. Little bowl cell. A lot of people will buy them, because there again, the pricing goes by the size, so the smaller they are, the cheaper they are, basically. So that's my general rule. A lot of people have other philosophies on how they price their work, but some people like to talk about, I want to make X number of dollars per hour or whatever. And I'm like, well, how do you justify charging somebody by the hour for something like this? Maybe it's somebody that's just starting out and turning, and they say, well, I'm going to charge $20. I want to make $15 an hour or $20 an hour making this stuff. Well, it may take you twice as long, or even 3 times as long, as somebody that has the experience to do it. So, to me, how is that fair to the end consumer? But one of the guys at the club, he does a whole lot of selling of stuff, and I don't even remember what his philosophy was. It's pretty much he's going to price it as high as he feels it'll sell, which he is very fortunate on the stuff that he does. He does almost everything he does almost is burl, because he has a very good sources, I guess you would say, to get burl material for free. I don't think he pays for any of it. So, okay. Let me show you a little bit. I got to put my shower curtain down. This might make us dizzy. But I have 2 monitors. I have a monitor up here to my left, and there's another one over here on the right. The one on the right has just the OBS on it, and the other one has the what I'm actually streaming out there and things like that. So let me switch over. I can show you this. We can do it that way. So that's what my grinder looks like. Very dirty. It's a dirty girl. Grinding steel is dirty. They are both CBN wheels. So let's start over here. Let me loosen that up. Yeah, pretty much. It's a very difficult show. Okay. Come on, catch up. Lots of junk. Okay. Now I'm following it. 10-inch sliding compound miter saw. It is a Makita. If you would want my recommendation on it, this is the one to buy. Still to this day. I certainly would not buy a Festool. They are just ridiculously priced. And these do a great job. This piece that's on here is a leg for my countertop, which probably if I do something later on this week, I may do this, but I'd have to rearrange. I think I'd have to rearrange my cameras a little bit to even do it because it's 30 inches long, 3.5, 3 3/4. I think it's like 3.5 inches square. This is oak, and it is two pieces. It is not one solid piece. It's two pieces laminated together. But you're hard pressed. You do enough woodworking over the years. I got to figure out I got to look at the end grain. I couldn't find it. I've matched the grain up. The grain matches. This is actually out of one board, so the grain automatically matches. So there is a glue line running down through that side, as well as that side. This side's a little bit easier to see because there's a couple little knots that will be turning out, hopefully. But that's a little bit of a painstaking kind of work to do. So, see, go up, over that way. It's a drill press. It is a benchtop drill press. It is also a 14-inch, I think it is, benchtop drill press. That's a Bridgewood. That thing is probably 30 years old. There used to be a company close to us that sold them. This thing does not. Maybe it could do it that way. There we go. Loosen the right things up. 10-inch table saw. That is a Delta contractor saw. It is probably 30 years old too. That's an aftermarket fence on it. That is the Vega fence. The Vega fences are still made. When I originally bought this table saw 30 years ago, I bought just the saw without the fence because at that time they had their, which I think they still have them, I think they called it a unifence, and it also had a 50-inch capacity. Well, as you can see, I don't have 50 inches because my dust collector sits right there. Yeah, you can see the dust collector, sort of. So I don't have that much room over there, and it wouldn't do me any good because it's behind a wall. So I didn't want their fence, and I conned a guy. It was a woodworking store. They only stayed in business probably 5 or 6 years around here. And I said, will you sell me the saw without the fence? And the one guy said no. And then the manager's like, are you going to take it today? I'm like, yeah. So he took off, I don't know, it was a couple $100 for the fence. And I already had the Vega fence because at one point I had a Craftsman table saw which had a junk fence on it, which the whole saw was really junk, but the fence was worse than anything. So I had purchased the Vega fence, and they're really, I can pick on the $3,000 table saws. This has a double. You really can't see it very well. Let me see if I can get that down a little bit more. I don't have a very good angle. Typical table saw fence. Pull it up, move it. This one also has a secondary fence and a wheel, or a secondary stop, and a tiny little wheel that's on a threaded rod. So I can lock that down, lift that up, and I can move the fence very, very slowly in very small increments. If I wanted to move a 32nd of an inch or 64th of an inch, that's how I would do it, is with the secondary one. So it's really a super nice feature to it. It's kind of a, you know, for me to go look at a new table saw, it's like, it doesn't have that on it. But, okay. Table saw. I'm going to step in front of the camera. And then we move over to one of the things that I would say you definitely don't need. That's a radio arm saw. They're really obsolete. Oh yeah, that's. I looked at I was over at Woodcraft. I looked at the new Laguna table saws, and they don't have it. It serves its purpose. That's my rough cutting um, stuff that I use to rough cut stuff. They're not a precise. You know, they don't. They're not real precise. They never were. And this is actually a good one. This one was, in its day, was a very good one. But like I say, it's used to cut stuff down. Well, I use it mainly for cutting long stuff, like cutting stuff down. Um, I have a 6-inch Powermatic joiner. That's the 54A. That's a long bed, 6-inch. That bed is as long as a lot of people buy an 8-inch joiner just so they get the longer bed and wider cutters. But they're really after the long bed, where that one is just as long as the 8-inch one. I bought that used many, many years ago. I love it. I mean, the flattened long stock or joint long stock, there's no comparison to a shorter joiner, which I had before. And let's get over here. Workbench. We're still working on organizing more stuff. Yeah. I. Are you talking about router bits? Oh, no. You're talking about the. Okay. For me to change that one, I looked at it not too long ago. Actually, there's some of them now that are actually sort of reasonably priced. I think the one that I just looked at not too long ago was around $350 or $400. But that comes at a price. I know some people that have them. I know some people that have the spiral head in the joiner. They have a spiral head in a thickness planer. They all say the same thing, that they're quieter, but they also all say the same thing, that they leave lines because those spiral cutters are not necessarily overlapped enough to eliminate the little lines that may be left behind. And they're not cheap. I mean, the blades for that one, because I just bought a new set not too long ago, are around $30 to $35. And that's for Freud blades, which are good blades for it. Versus if you would have the spiral cutters on that, spiral head on that, trying to think how many was on it, 36? I want to say 36 cutters. You would spend a lot of money to replace 36 cutters on that. Now, granted, they have 4 sides to it, but it's, yes, very expensive. And I don't know that I'm actually, I've looked at some videos on some of that stuff to actually replace that with a spiral head in there. It'd be one of them deals where I don't have, you're going to replace 3, because whatever you hit, you're going to hit it 3 times. Yeah. I don't know. I'm always amused. As a woodworker, I'm always amused at some of the people that I see on social media that are doing some, especially the guys that are doing like cutting boards and stuff like that, that they glue up, which is what that is on the workbench, which is way too bright over there for this camera. That is a maple. What's on the workbench is maple. That's the bottom for the dresser. To the left of the workbench, there's 2 more panels that are standing up. They're the end panels for it. Those I glue, those 3 panels is what I did today. That's about 4 hours worth of work right there just to do those 3 panels. That's also starting with lumber was not totally rough cut. It was actually planed at one point to 7/8 of an inch thick. It's now 13/16. From there, it will go through the drum sander tomorrow to flatten everything out. But to give you an idea, this has been the project in the last umpteen months. This wall, this end right here, up until a couple months ago, went straight over. Would have came straight over to basically the end of my workbench, and then there was another wall here. This is how I've worked for 30-some years. And we decided, my wife said, well, I don't know why you just don't, expand things. So I went out. This on the other side of this wall for me is a family room, which we really don't use anymore. It is totally been redone, but well, the garage shops are, I don't know. This house originally had a carport that we actually turned it into a garage probably 6 or 8 years ago, maybe. And that's what the guys that were here doing the work are like. He's like, oh man, this make a dandy shop now, because the carport was basically double length. I could actually fit 2 normal sized cars in the garage if I didn't have other stuff there. But I'm like, yeah, that's nice. I said, but if just like for me, when I come home from work in the evenings, I can come down here and work for, so I can come down here and piddle around or do whatever for an hour or so. And if I had a garage shop, that's fine and dandy for certain times of the year. But I also live in Pennsylvania. Today it got hot. So if I had a garage shop, then I would have to heat it and air condition it. And, when you weren't heating it or air conditioning it, then like the glues and stains and finishes and all that stuff would still have to come inside the house. So this is just easier for me this is the way I've done it since day one. So would it be nice to have an exterior shop, maybe 3 or 4 times this size? Yeah, but it would just mean that I would collect 3 or 4 times as much stuff. So that's where we're at, what we're doing. And now we're going to be done. See if we can find somebody to actually raid into tonight. There hasn't been. Jeez. Nobody. That's weird. Oh well. Nobody that I follow, I'll put it that way. And I follow a bunch. So until maybe some other night this week, I appreciate you all stopping by, hanging out, chatting along. Like I say, well, maybe another evening this week or so. If not, I'm generally here on Sunday evenings, usually around the same time, about 6 or 6:30. Yeah, nice chatting with you. You're in Texas too, right? You too, Random. Well, like I say, until next time, you all have a good week and stay safe in the shop. If you ever have any questions, I'm easy to get a hold of. Okay. And we'll see y'all another day. Thanks for joining.